Happy Friday morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Made Man, the only podcast in the world about madmen, hosted by me. That's right, I host no other podcast about madmen. This is the only one, and today I watched, and I just finished, Season 2, Episode 2 of Mad Men, Flight 1. A lot of things happen in this episode. And it feels like something tragic happened in Pete Campbell's life, and yet Don Draper had the worst episode as far as his character was having a worse time. It was a little family life, a little business life. Things weren't great for Don Draper, and yet Pete obviously had something more traumatic happen in his life. The show started with a party at Kinsey's house, and he wants to be very much not just an advertising guy, not just a Madison Avenue man, a businessman. He sees himself as an artsy writer. I don't know if it's like an Upper West Side, Upper East Side, like something better than these other suits. You know, he sees himself as more artistic. He likes to wear scarves. He likes his beard. He likes to smoke his pipe. He likes to talk fancy. And he threw a party with a lot of people from the office. And the big thing I got out of it was Pete and his wife weren't very comfortable there. Peggy met up with a guy but didn't fall for his courtship of her, I guess you could say. And Joan is racist and jealous. I think that's what I got out of that. But Kinsey gets his revenge in the end because I think it's Paul Kinsey, I believe. I think that's the name. But his girlfriend is a black woman, African-American woman, whatever you want to say. I don't care. And she's like, they're talking a little bit. He's like, don't talk while I'm gone. This is my girlfriend. And Joan's like, ooh, I didn't realize he was so open-minded. She says this right to her. Like, he has to be open-minded. That's the only reason he'd be dating a black woman, which is, it sounds like you're trying to be like, oh, how nice, how quaint, but you're really condescending and also very racist. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to ever like Joan on this show, because I don't. I think she's a biatch, and I wonder if that's the way it's always going to be. But I mean, she's in her 30s. Well, what am I going to do? Also it shows that Kinsey stole a typewriter from work so that he could write at home. But that was I don't think anything will happen from that. Yet. I don't know. We'll see. The big thing was the next day when Sterling and Draper come to work. Everyone in the office is huddled around one desk. Now, I thought everyone in the office was going to be late because of the party. But they weren't. They were huddled around one desk because on the radio, a news story went out that American Airlines flight has crashed. And 100 people on board, everyone's dead. And they're already starting to make jokes. Even Pete makes a joke saying they were going on a golf trip. And they said when it hit the bay, everything turned plaid. Oh, they're laughing. And they're like, pull all the Mohawk Air ads. We don't need to see Mohawk Air ads next to news story of plane crash, everyone dying. And in the background, we see Peggy come in with a vacuum cleaner. What I forgot to mention was earlier on, Peggy, they show her sleeping in and the phone ringing over and over and over. And I thought it was work, but it might be family. Because later on, Peggy goes to visit her mother and I guess her sister. And they're like, oh, these people have been asking about you at church. They've been asking about you at church. She's like, okay, that's great. I don't need to go to church. And, I can take care of myself. And the sister, I'm assuming it's the sister, said, well, that's not what the state says, and that's not what the health board said or whatever. And you realize, ooh, that's a dig at the kid she had, and the kid she gave up for adoption. And Peggy's like, it's great to see you guys. Nice to see you. She wanted to get the hell out of there. And the sister's like, aren't you going to go say goodnight? She opens the door, and the little kid's like, hey, Aunt Peggy. And but the big thing is there's also a baby there. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's her baby. The sister's raising her baby. She didn't give up the baby for adoption, because she looked at that baby and she just, or she looked at the baby of her sister and just thought of the baby she gave her for adoption. I'm not quite sure. trying to put it together. She either looked at this kid and was like, "Oh my God, that's a baby like a baby that I had that I gave away," or "That's my baby." I'm not entirely sure yet. But in the end of the episode, she goes and ends up going to church with her family, and it's weird because it's not weird. It's weird for me to see that the mass was all done in Latin. And that's the way it used to be. Now, I grew up as a church kid, not like some, super crazy religious family, but I did go to Catholic school. So I went to church every week up until I was like 18. I had to go to church every week. And it was, boring enough in English. And I knew what was going on in Latin. And the priest isn't even facing you. I can't even imagine like how you dealt with that. But that was the end of the episode, and was that the end of the episode? No, it wasn't. Well, yes, it was. But I'm bouncing around. So that's Peggy's story for the most part. There was one nice, cool thing she said to that guy Eugene, the kid who tried to court her, the young man who was making out with her at the party. He said, "You work for these guys?" And she said, "I work with these guys." I thought that was pretty cool on her part. But okay, that's Peggy's story. She's out of the way. Don's story. Don, he's upset about having to deal with Mohawk Air, and at the same time, Duck Phillips, Duck with a D, he sees it as an opportunity. He has a friend over at American Airlines who are willing to make a change. But the thing is, they need to show how serious they are about this, to the point where they need to drop Mohawk Airlines to show they don't even have an airline, that they're all in on American Airlines, which Don hates. He thinks it's a terrible idea. He likes Mohawk Air. They pay their bills. They're loyal. He's loyal. And he does not like this at all. But he gets overruled by Sterling. He gets overruled by Cooper. And Sterling's like, he'll get over it, So he is overruled. Even though he's a partner, he's not really fully, he's like the junior partner or whatever. He's not, he doesn't get what he wants, or he doesn't get what he thinks is right. And this is all for if, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. At the same time, Pete Campbell picks up a phone and he's really shocked, and he finds out his dad was on that plane and his dad died. Now, the crazy thing about it is that Pete Campbell, he's a semi-robot. He didn't know what to do. He literally didn't know what to do. He went into Don's room. He's like, do I get sad? What do I do? Do I cry? Do I go home? Do I mourn? Do I make arrangements? Now, he could be in shock, or it could just be because he's part android, that he literally doesn't know what a human being does, because he's a psycho. I got both things. Like, this guy really does not know how to react. He almost wants to go back to just living life as it is. He's with his mother and his brother at the funeral, and the brother starts saying, Dad basically blew all his money. He didn't have a woman. He just blew it on this and that. So I don't think that he has this money that they thought he did. He didn't think he was getting an inheritance, and the brother's like, well, you weren't getting it. And at this point, Pete's parents, who knows what happens to the mother now, because they don't have any money. Now, Pete's okay because he's got a rich in-law family, so I don't think he cares all that much. I think he just wants to put that part of his family behind him. But he did feel bad because the last conversation he had with his dad was arguing about dogs. So obviously there's something humanizing going on there. And Duck comes into his office and says, hey, I know this is touchy, and I'm sorry to hear about this. I read about it in the paper, because Pete didn't tell anybody. But we are going after American Airlines, and, I think you'd be great on the account. And Pete's like, I think that's in poor taste. I think that's a bad idea. And that's him thinking that. He's not even sure of that. Doug's like, I apologize. That was bad. And in the end, Pete shows up. And he actually uses his dad's death to in the pitch to the American Airlines guy. The look on the guy in American Airlines' face when Pete says, my father was on that plane, was like, I don't know. I'm so sorry to hear that. And I think Duck was like, who he actually shared it. And Pete's like, I'm going to use this for my job. And it's funny that Pete's father was so against advertising. He hated advertising. He hated that Pete had this job. In the end, Pete's using his own father's death to propel his advertising career. One more little screw you, Dad. I think that's what I got out of it, at least. Which we'll see how this builds. Now, the fact that they are going with American Airlines means they can no longer go with Mohawk Air. That brings me back to Dawn. I kind of blew Dawn off a little bit. Dawn had a little home life going on where they had the neighbors over to play cards. And, they talked a little bit. And then the neighbor guy's like, oh, she's got this babysitter coming in. And I swear that she brings her in just to tease me. This guy's a little creep. He's talking about the teenage babysitter. And Dawn's like, trying to avoid that conversation. Later on, he tells them, he's like, I got rid of the apartment. I got rid of this because he was the one she found the extra phone bill and the apartment and all this stuff. He got rid of all that. He's trying to be good. And you could see that bothered, that whole thing still bothers Betty because she brought up a little bit about, I don't know, she brought up him like gaining weight and it looks better that way. And Dawn's like, I don't want to fight with you. And they were not like close. I don't know. They were arguing about just little things. She went outside for a smoke and he just sat there and he's like, I'm not going to fight with you. And he was like, almost like too exhausted. Like, I just don't care about this. I don't have enough in me to fight for this. With Don also, I mean, what else happened in the episode? Doc told him where you have to pull, or he found out about them having to pull Mohawk. So he was pissed at Pete. He couldn't even deal with Pete later on in the episode. And in the end, he had to get the guy from Mohawk Air and sit him down. And almost like the guy knew it was coming. And he's like, look, are you going to say it? And he's like, look, we have to end our agreement, our relationship with Mohawk Air. And the Mohawk Air guy's like, he goes, it wasn't my decision. He goes, well, it wasn't, because when I was told that I was getting Sterling Cooper, I was told I was getting Don Draper. We were going to grow this company together. We were going to, do all these things together. And none of that happened. And when the guy said, this reminds me of Pearl Harbor in more than one way. Now, it was Japanese, also that he was about to get kind of bombed. He was about to get a surprise attack and just be wiped out. I think that's what he meant by that. So I thought that was a nice little analogy. I think, did that cover everything in the episode? Well, towards the end of the episode, Joan went to her locker. Now, they showed Joan taking a purse out of her locker. I think they showed that so we could see her name, I think. I don't know. Because then later, these girls are giggling in the office. Joan looks, and there's a driver's license with her name on it. And she was, it said the year 1931, date of birth, which is crazy when I think about these people and how much older they are than my parents, in the real world years. So that means she's, I'm guessing, 30? At this point, or 31. I don't know where we are. We jumped ahead in time, but I'm going to say 30. And they giggled about that, like a woman being 30 is a bad thing. And when Peggy was pressed about it, she's like, oh, I didn't see who did it. But she had a big smile on her face, like, I didn't know you were over 30. Like, who gives a shit? That is something that's important. I guess being a woman over 30 then, I mean, maybe being a woman over, in certain things, like acting and stuff, I know sometimes they're like, oh, they're over 30 or something like that. That's crazy. That's awful. And the fact that it was just an accepted, like, thing then, or it wasn't something to say, this is an awful travesty to even be prejudiced against women over 30. Back then it was like, oh, I'm over 30 and, I need to hide that. No one should know that because it's not good. Crazy and dumb. But obviously Kinsey did it. There's no doubt in my mind he did it. So we'll see what happens there. So that's where I think the typewriter might come up again in the future. Maybe not. But they actually had a moment before that where they met and he's like, what did you talk to my girlfriend about? And she basically called him on dating the woman only because she was black so that he could show how open-minded he is. So she was kind of racist to this girl. And he goes, I didn't know you were like that, but he also called him out for kind of doing it or dating this woman, not because he liked this woman, or not only because he liked this woman, but because it showed how cool and hip and modern he is. And he did not dissuade her on that. It almost like he was like, he got caught. That's why I think he did the license thing later. I think, my friends, I think that covers it. Don, there was a Japanese, I believe Japanese, an Asian waitress who walked up real seductively, and she's like, "Do you need anything?" And he just looked at her. He's like, "No, I'm good." But it was almost, for a second, I thought he was like, "Yeah, I need you. Let's go. Let's get out of here." And I don't know if she was I don't think she was actually throwing herself at him. She was just being nice and saying, "You need a drink, you need food." But Don's like, "No, I'm good. I'm all set." And then the episode ends with church and Peggy back at Mass. Whether that stays or not, I don't know. Also, she brought a vacuum into the office, and then she brought the vacuum back to her mother's. I'm not sure what was going on there. I don't know if she was bringing a vacuum from her house to work, then to her mother's so they could, or I don't know what was going on, but there was a vacuum, and I don't really know why. And I think that covers everything. Let's see, Don had his friends over, didn't really want them, spent a little time with his kids who like to eat candy, and his daughter Sally, who's now who's Sabrina on the new Sabrina show on Netflix. But they let her, Sally, mix the drinks, which is hilarious. A little small talk with the neighbors, not as much small talk with his own wife. He has to deal with losing the airline, Mohawk Air. And Pete obviously dealing with his father's death, but at the same time using that death as an advantage at work because he is, again, a psychopath. Joan calling out Kinsey, being a little racist and getting her comeuppance because now we know she's over 30. And Peggy meeting with a guy but not doing anything further, and seeing her mother, her sister, getting back to church, and maybe seeing her child. I'm not entirely sure. But that's a guess. It's either a kid who reminded her of her baby or her baby. We'll see. Time will tell. But an interesting fact, at the end of the episode, it said dedicated to Christopher Allport, I believe is the name. I looked it up. I say I don't do a little research, but I did look this up. Christopher Allport was the actor who played Pete Campbell's father. This man actually died, and he wasn't that old. And it's sad. It's actually pretty tragic. In 2008, he was one of 3 people who died in an avalanche in California. I looked it up I saw it on his Wikipedia page. And it was, they took, apparently he was going to be a reoccurring character. He was only in one episode, the one where he kind of disapproved of Pete's life. But he was going to be a reoccurring character. And this tragic event happened, this avalanche, he died. So they killed off the character and they dedicated the episode to him. I don't know if this was an extra part of the episode. I don't know if this. It's horrible for me to say is like what so much happened in the story. Did all these things with Pete happen simply because the actor died? Was this written in response? Like I don't know the difference in time between when the actor passed away to when the story was written. I'm not sure it was a direct response or it's, well, now because the actor's gone, we can, kill off the character. I don't know how that works. But sad, no matter what, it's a really sad thing to find out. Tragic. And again, that's 10 years ago. I am so far behind in this show as far as when it's happened. To me, it's happening right now. So this guy just passed away and I'm sad about it right now. But it was 10 years ago. In the real world of Mad Men. But that's not the real world. The real world is me right now talking to you about Made Men. And I want to thank you for listening to another fantastic episode. I know it's fantastic because I just did it. And you're listening to it still, so you obviously think it's fantastic too. Now, what can you do to help me? Well, I'll tell you. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Make some friends and tell them. Tweet about us. Our Twitter is @MadeMenPod. On Facebook, you can find us at Fans Not Experts, but the real place to find us is fansnotexperts.com/mademan. Now, the podcast itself, the easiest way to subscribe, honestly, if you go to anchor.fm/mademen. That's a place where you can subscribe to iTunes. You can subscribe to Stitcher, TuneIn, all these other places. We are basically everywhere podcasts are available, and all you need to do is make 5 friends and have those 5 friends get 5 friends, and so on and so forth. And we kind of have a pyramid scheme of listenership. Now, you get no money, but it costs you no money. So it's really a win-win for me. It's all about me and getting more listeners. And it's up to you, New York, New York. I'm done. I need to start my workday now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming with me on this journey as I become a made man. Oh, the Sox won the World Series. Pretty awesome.
Fans not experts.